I paid my son and his wife $900 a week. They skipped my 75th birthday. When I asked why, my daughter-in-law smirked and said, "Your age means nothing to us." Trembling, I cut them off. 35 minutes late, they still had no idea what was coming. Giovanni's. Arthur used to bring me here every year, back when anniversaries meant something, when promises weren't just pretty words people said to get what they needed. The red vinyl booths, the smell of garlic and basil, the way the candlelight made everything look softer, kinder than it actually was. I'd made the reservation 3 weeks ago. Told David about it twice. Sent Tanya a text reminder that morning with the time and address. She'd responded with a thumbs-up emoji, just that, a little blue hand that I'd stared at for 5 minutes, trying to decode what it meant, if it meant anything at all. Now I was sitting here, watching that same thumb scroll past on my phone screen as I checked for messages. 6:47 p.m. They were 35 minutes late. The waiter, couldn't have been more than 19, with kind eyes and an uncertain smile, approached for the 3rd time. "Ma'am, would you like to go ahead and order, or—" "Just a few more minutes," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, hollow, like I was talking from the bottom of a well. "They're probably just stuck in traffic." He nodded, but I saw the pity flash across his face. That look. I'd been seeing variations of it for 3 years now, ever since I'd started talking about David's job situation, about helping out, about how family takes care of family. The pity that says, "Oh, honey, you don't see it yet, do you?" My phone lit up, finally. David's name on the screen. My hands actually shook as I answered. "David? Where are you? Are you close?" "Mom." His voice had that edge to it, that tone he'd developed somewhere along the way, the one that made me feel like I was bothering him just by existing. "We're not coming. Something came up." I heard it in the background before he could cover the phone. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses, a party. They were at a party. "What do you mean something came up?" "David, we planned this week's—" "Just tell her, David." Tanya's voice, sharp and clear. Not even trying to whisper. "Stop dragging it out." The phone rustled. Then Tanya's voice came through, "And I will remember every syllable of this for the rest of my life. Eleanor, listen. Your age means nothing to us, okay? It's just a number. You'll have other birthdays. We had an opportunity to go to Melissa's housewarming, and honestly, we're not going to pass that up to watch you eat pasta. Don't make this into some big dramatic thing." The line went dead. Not happy birthday. Not we're sorry. Not even the decency of a lie I could pretend to believe. Just, your age means nothing to us. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone like it might suddenly transform into an apology, an explanation, anything that would make the last 3 years make sense. The waiter appeared again. This time he wasn't asking about ordering. He was carrying a small cake, probably meant for someone else's celebration, with 75 tiny candles already lit. His name tag said Marcus. "Happy birthday," he said quietly. And he meant it. This stranger, this 19-year-old kid making $9 an hour, meant it more than my own son had in 3 years. "Thank you, Marcus." My voice cracked, just slightly, just enough. He set it down, gave me that same pitying look, and walked away. I stared at those 75 flames. Did the math I'd been avoiding for months. $700 a week, 52 weeks, 3 years, over $109,000. That wasn't counting the emergencies. The car repair that cost $1,200. The medical bills, $800 here, $500 there. The Christmas money for Tanya's family. The new furniture David needed for his home office. I'd skipped doctor's appointments to afford those transfers, rationed my blood pressure medication, eaten crackers and canned soup 4 nights a week while David posted pictures of steakhouse dinners on Facebook, and they couldn't show up for my birthday. I blew out the candles, all 75, made a wish, even though I've never believed in that kind of magic. Then I paid the bill, $47 for a celebration that never happened, left Marcus a $30 tip because he was the only person who'd acknowledged my existence that day, and walked to my car. I sat there for 20 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, engine off, staring at the dashboard like it held answers. And that's when I realized I hadn't been helping my son. I'd been funding my own irrelevance, paying $700 a week for the privilege of being forgotten. The trembling started in my hands and worked its way up my arms into my chest, until my whole body was shaking with something I couldn't name yet. Not quite rage, not quite grief. Clarity. Cold, devastating clarity. I started the car and drove home, and I didn't cry. Not yet. I had work to do first. 3 years ago, David showed up at my door on a Thursday afternoon with his whole life falling apart behind his eyes. I remember because Thursday was the day I usually did my grocery shopping, and I was standing in the doorway with my purse on my shoulder, car keys in hand, ready to leave. But the look on his face stopped me cold. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked the way it used to when he was 7 years old and had scraped his knee. "I lost my job." Tanya stood behind him on the porch, arms crossed, staring at her phone. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there scrolling, while my son tried not to cry in front of me. They came inside, sat on my couch, the one Arthur and I had bought 30 years ago, worn thin in all the spots where real life happens. David explained it all: the tech company downsizing, the severance package that barely covered 2 months' rent, the bills piling up, the job market that kept promising interviews that never materialized. "Just until I get back on my feet, Mom," he said. "I'm not asking for charity, just a bridge, temporary." And God help me, I looked at him and saw Arthur. My husband, who'd worked 40 years at the post office, rain or shine, never missed a day, provided for his family with steady hands and a steadfast heart. David had his father's eyes, his father's jawline, and in that moment I wanted so desperately to believe he had his father's character too. "How much do you need?" I asked. That's how it started. $500 a week, we agreed, just until the job situation stabilized. I had Arthur's life insurance, his pension, Social Security. I could afford it. It was what Arthur would have done. Except 500 became 700 because rent went up. And 700 became the baseline, the weekly ritual that defined my Fridays. Every Friday morning at 9 a.m., I'd log into my bank account and transfer the money. Watch my balance drop. Tell myself it was temporary. Tell myself I was being a good mother. Then came the emergencies, and they always came as emergencies, always framed as crises that required immediate intervention. The car repair, $1,200 because the transmission was failing, and how could David get to job interviews without a car? The medical bills, $800 for Tanya's dental work that insurance wouldn't cover. $650 for Christmas presents for Tanya's family because we can't show up empty-handed, Eleanor. What would they think? I started making adjustments, small ones at first, skipping my annual checkup. I felt fine, didn't I? Stretching my blood pressure medication by cutting pills in half, then taking them every other day instead of daily, shopping at the discount grocery store instead of the regular one, buying the dented cans and the day-old bread, turning the heat down to 62 in winter and wearing 2 sweaters instead. These weren't sacrifices, I told myself. These were choices. This was what mothers did. Then, 2 months before my 75th birthday, Tanya posted the photos. I saw them on Facebook at 11 o'clock at night, sitting at my kitchen table with my old desktop computer, humming like it was angry about still being alive. Cancun, a resort with infinity pools and palm trees. Tanya in a designer swimsuit, holding a bright blue cocktail with an umbrella in it. David in the background, sunglasses on, grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Needed this getaway, #blessed, #living our best life." I sat there calculating. The flight alone would have been at least $600 per person. The resort, maybe $200 a night for a week. The food, the drinks, the excursions. I pulled up my own bank statements. I'd spent $347 on groceries that entire month. That trip cost more than I spent on food in 6 months. I scrolled through the other photos. Tanya's designer sunglasses. I recognized the brand from a magazine in the doctor's waiting room. $400. The new purse in the corner of one shot. The watches. The restaurant meals with wine bottles that cost more than my electric bill. And every Friday morning, like clockwork, $700 left my account and entered theirs. I closed the laptop, sat in the dark kitchen, and I started keeping a list, not of the money, I already knew those numbers by heart. A list of the last time David had asked me how I was doing. The last time either of them had said thank you without it being attached to a new request. The last time they'd invited me over, visited without needing something, remembered a holiday that wasn't Christmas. It was a very short list. Actually, it wasn't a list at all. It was blank paper, staring back at me, holding up a mirror I'd been avoiding for 3 years. But I didn't stop the transfers. Not yet. Because stopping meant admitting I'd made a mistake. Stopping meant facing the possibility that my son didn't need a bridge, he needed a bank. And I wasn't ready to be that honest. Not yet. The birthday would change that. Marge noticed the shoes first. We were standing in the fellowship hall after Sunday service, the usual crowd milling around the coffee and donuts, when she looked down at my feet and her whole face changed. I was wearing the same black flats I'd been wearing for 2 years. The sole on the right one had separated slightly from the leather, creating a small gap that let in water when it rained. I'd glued it back twice already. "Ellie, honey," Marge said, her voice dropping to that particular tone of concern that made my chest tighten. "When's the last time you bought yourself something nice?" I laughed it off. Tried to, anyway. "Oh, these old things. They're comfortable. You know me, I hate breaking in new shoes." But Marge wasn't looking at my shoes anymore. She was looking at me, really looking. At the way my Sunday dress hung a little looser than it had last year, at the careful way I'd applied makeup to hide the circles under my eyes, at my hands, which had started to look older somehow, the skin papery and thin. "You're giving everything away, aren't you?" she said quietly. The coffee in my styrofoam cup suddenly became very interesting. I stared into it like it held secrets. "I'm helping my son. That's what mothers do." "That's what mothers do when their children need help," Marge corrected gently. "Not when their children need enabling." Before I could respond, Grace appeared at my elbow. Grace, who was 82 and had buried 2 husbands and raised 5 kids and didn't believe in sugarcoating anything life had already made bitter enough. "We need to talk," Grace said. And it wasn't a suggestion. She steered me to a corner table, away from the donuts and the chit-chat and the safety of polite Sunday morning small talk. Marge followed. They sat on either side of me like loving bailiffs, trapping me with kindness. "Your son's got 2 working hands," Grace said, folding her arms across her chest. "2 working hands, a wife, and I'm willing to bet a roof over his head. Meanwhile, you're eating soup for dinner 4 nights a week and pretending those shoes aren't falling apart." "You don't understand," I started, but Grace held up one weathered hand. "Oh, I understand perfectly. You think if you keep giving, he'll remember how to be grateful. You think if you sacrifice enough, he'll suddenly become the man you raised him to be. You think love is measured in bank transfers." She leaned forward, her eyes sharp and sad at the same time. "This isn't love, Ellie. This is fear." The words hit me like a physical thing. I felt my throat close up, my eyes start to burn. "If I stop helping him," I whispered, and my voice cracked right down the middle, "I'll lose him completely." There it was. The truth I'd been carrying around like a stone in my chest for 3 years. The fear that woke me up at 3 in the morning and kept me company while I ate my crackers and soup. The terror that if I stopped being useful, I'd stop being loved. Marge reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, solid, real. "Baby," she said, and the gentleness in her voice made it worse somehow, made the tears I'd been holding back start to spill over. "When's the last time David asked how you were doing?" I opened my mouth to answer. The words should have been right there, ready. A son who cares asks about his mother. A son who loves checks in, shows interest, wants to know about her doctor's appointments and her book, club, and whether her back is still bothering her. I sat there with my mouth open, searching my memory, scrolling back through 3 years of phone calls and text messages and hurried visits. 3 years of conversations about money, about bills, about what David needed, what Tanya wanted, what crisis required solving this week. And I couldn't remember. Not a single instance, not one conversation where David had asked about me, about my health, my life, my loneliness in this house that still smelled like Arthur's aftershave in the bathroom cabinet I couldn't bring myself to clean out. Not once in 3 years. The silence at that table stretched out like a canyon. Marge squeezed my hand. Grace's expression softened just slightly, just enough to let me know she wasn't angry at me. She was angry for me. "He calls every week," I finally said, my voice small and desperate. "He texts." "To ask for money," Grace said flatly. "Not to ask about you." I pulled my hand away from Marge's, stood up. My chair scraped against the linoleum floor, and a few people glanced over. I grabbed my purse, the same purse I'd been carrying since Arthur was alive, and tried to compose myself. "I need to go," I said. "Ellie," Marge started. "I just need to think. Please." They let me leave, but I felt their eyes on my back the whole way to the door. Felt the weight of their concern, their pity, their terrible, unbearable clarity. I sat in my car in the church parking lot for 15 minutes before I could trust myself to drive. Because they were right, and I'd known they were right for longer than I wanted to admit. Friday morning arrived the way it always did, with weak November sunlight filtering through my kitchen curtains and the weight of routine pressing down on my shoulders like an old coat I couldn't take off. I sat at the kitchen table with Arthur's coffee mug in my hands, the blue one with the chipped handle that he'd used every morning for 20 years. I hadn't been able to drink from it since he died, but I held it sometimes when I needed to feel like he was still here, still watching, still able to tell me what to do. The clock on the microwave read 8:47 a.m. In 13 minutes, the automatic transfer would go through. $700 would leave my account and appear in David's, the same way it had every Friday for 3 years. 156 consecutive weeks. Not a single one missed. Not when I had the flu so bad I could barely stand. Not when the furnace died in January and I had to choose between fixing it and keeping warm with space heaters from the hardware store. Not even the week Arthur would have turned 78, when I could barely get out of bed for the grief. Every single Friday. Like clockwork. Like obligation. Like proof that I still mattered to someone, even if that mattering came with a price tag. My laptop sat open in front of me, the bank's website already loaded, the automatic transfer screen showing the scheduled payment, waiting to process in. I glanced at the clock again, 11 minutes. My phone sat next to the laptop, dark, silent. No good morning text from David. No thanks mom message. Those had stopped about 6 months in, once the transfers became expected rather than appreciated, once I became a service rather than a person. I thought about Marge's question. "When's the last time David asked how you were doing?" I thought about Grace's words. "This isn't love, Ellie. This is fear." I thought about Tanya's voice on my birthday, so casual in its cruelty. "Your age means nothing to us." My hands were shaking. I set down Arthur's mug because I was afraid I'd drop it, and that mug was one of the few things I had left that still felt like him. The cursor hovered over the cancel transfer button. This was insane. You don't just cut off your own son. You don't make decisions like this when you're emotional, when you're hurt, Except I'd been hurt for 3 years. And I'd kept giving anyway. The clock clicked to 8:52, 8 minutes. I clicked the button. The screen asked me to confirm, "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled transfer?" My finger hesitated over the trackpad. This was it. This was the moment where I chose between the son I desperately wanted to believe in and the reality I'd been funding, between the fear of losing him and the certainty that I'd already lost him. I just hadn't stopped paying for the illusion yet. I clicked confirm. The screen refreshed. Transfer canceled. 3 words. That's all it took to break a 3-year pattern. 3 words on a screen, and suddenly I couldn't breathe properly. The shaking in my hands spread up my arms into my chest until I had to press my palms flat against the table just to feel steady. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. The phone rang at 9:30. I stared at David's name on the screen for 3 rings before I answered. My voice, when it came out, didn't sound like mine. It sounded like someone else, someone calmer, someone who'd already made peace with what was about to happen. "Hello?" "Mom." David's voice was tight, panicked. The money didn't come through. "Is something wrong with your bank? Did the transfer fail?" "Nothing's wrong with the bank." A pause. I could hear him breathing, could picture him standing wherever he was, phone pressed to his ear, trying to process what I'd just said. Then what happened? It's Friday. The money always. I know what day it is, David. So what's going on? Did you forget to? I didn't forget. I took a breath. Let it out slowly. I'm just done. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Then his voice came back, and all the panic had crystallized into something harder. Done. What does that mean, done? It means I'm not sending money anymore. It means the weekly transfers are over. It means... My voice caught, but I pushed through it. It means I can't keep doing this. Can't keep... Mom, what are you talking about? We have bills. We have rent due next week. You can't just... I've been helping for 3 years, David. 3 years. And you couldn't show up for my birthday. That's what this is about? You're seriously going to hold that over? This isn't about holding anything over anyone, I said. And I was surprised by how steady my voice had become. This is about me finally understanding that I'm not helping you. I'm enabling you. There's a difference. He started to respond, but I hung up. My hands were still shaking, but I'd done it. I'd said no. I'd drawn a line. The phone buzzed. A text message. Tanya. 10:15 a.m. Are you serious right now? I stared at it. Didn't respond. 10:47 a.m. We have bills, Eleanor. Real bills. Do you even understand what you're doing? Still didn't respond. 11:23 a.m. You're really going to abandon your own son? Your own family? What kind of mother are you? I read every single message. Let each word sink in. Let them show me exactly what I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to face. Not once did either of them ask if I was okay. Not once did they apologize for the birthday. Not once did they acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, 3 years was long enough. They didn't see a mother who was hurting. They saw a bank that had suddenly closed. And somehow, seeing it spelled out so clearly in those angry text messages, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Then my phone rang again. Not David this time. Sam, David's cousin. And that's when I realized this was just the beginning. Eleanor, hi, it's Sam. His voice was uncomfortable, apologetic. Listen, David called me. He's really worried about you. He thinks maybe you're having some memory problems, making irrational decisions with your money. He asked me to check in, see if you're okay, maybe help you understand that you might need to talk to someone about... I hung up. David wasn't just angry about the money, he was already building a narrative, already telling people I was losing my mind, already preparing to discredit me before I could tell anyone the truth. Marge called at 7 in the morning on Sunday. I was still in bed, staring at the ceiling, doing what I'd been doing for the past 2 nights, running through every conversation with David from the last 3 years, looking for the moment I'd missed, the sign I should have seen, the place where love had turned into transaction without me noticing. Honey, you need to see this, Marge said, and her voice had that tight quality that meant something bad had happened, and she was trying to stay calm about it. See what? Tanya posted something on Facebook. I'm going to send you the link. Just prepare yourself, okay? My hands were already reaching for my laptop before we hung up. The link came through 30 seconds later. I clicked it. And there was Tanya, filling my screen, tears streaming down her face, real tears, or a convincing performance of them, her voice breaking in all the right places. The camera angle carefully chosen to catch the morning light through what I recognized as their living room window, the one with the expensive curtains they'd bought 6 months ago. I don't usually do this, she was saying, wiping at her eyes with a tissue. I don't usually put my personal life out there like this, but I'm heartbroken. Sometimes the people you love most, people you trust, the people who are supposed to be there for you. Her voice cracked, a perfect pause. They abandon you when you need them most. She wasn't saying my name, she was too smart for that. But the implication hung in the air like smoke. We're going through such a hard time right now. David's been trying so hard to find work, and we've been struggling, and we really thought, that family meant something, that blood meant something. Another artistic pause, another tear rolling down her cheek. But I guess we were wrong. I guess some people value money more than their own children. The video ended with her looking directly into the camera, her eyes red and wounded and brave. The caption read, "Sometimes the people you love most abandon you when you need them. Praying for strength, #family first, #heartbroken, #staying strong." The comments were already multiplying, dozens of them, then hundreds. "Oh, sweetie, stay strong. You don't need people like that in your life. Family should help family, period. Sending you prayers and love during this difficult time. Some people forget what it means to be there for your kids, so sorry you're going through this." I sat there, staring at the screen, watching strangers on the internet decide who I was based on a 2-minute performance. Watching my character get assassinated in real time by a daughter-in-law I'd given over $100,000 to. The video was shared. Once, 5 times, 20 times. Tanya's friends spreading it across their networks like wildfire, each share adding another layer of commentary. "This is David's mom. Can you believe it? She literally cut them off. While they're struggling." By Monday morning, I'd become the villain in a story I hadn't even known I was part of. Helen, my neighbor of 15 years, gave me a strange look when I went to check my mail. Not quite hostile, but not friendly either. The look you give someone you're not quite sure about anymore. "Morning, Eleanor," she said, cautious. "Morning, Helen." She hesitated, opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then just nodded and went back inside. I stood there at my mailbox, holding a stack of junk mail and a utility bill, feeling my world shrink around me like a sweater in hot water. At church on Sunday, the whispers started before I even made it to my usual pew. I saw Tanya's video on someone's phone as they scrolled past. Saw my own son in the comments section, "Thank you all for the support. This has been incredibly difficult for us." I sat through the service feeling eyes on the back of my neck, feeling judged, feeling like I needed to defend myself, explain myself, justify a decision that should have needed no justification. Marge and Grace flanked me like bodyguards afterward, but I could feel the shift, the uncertainty. Even among people who knew me, who'd known me for years, there was that question, what if it's true? What if she really did abandon them? I drove home and did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at Tanya's Instagram. Not just the recent posts. All of them. Scrolling back through months of carefully curated proof of a life that didn't match the sob story she was selling. And that's when I saw the comments starting to change. Someone had noticed. "Wait, didn't you just post vacation pics last month?" I scrolled down. There they were, the Cancun photos, posted 8 weeks ago. Tanya in a designer swimsuit, cocktails, sunset dinners, the infinity pool. Another comment appeared. "Hold up, that purse in your beach pic is a $2,000 Gucci bag. I literally have the same one saved in my wish list." Then another, "Your entire Instagram is luxury brunches and designer clothes. But you're struggling?" Someone had started screenshotting Tanya's own posts, lined up like evidence. The new furniture, the expensive restaurants, the concert tickets, the designer shoes, the Apple Watch, all posted within the last 6 months, all while she was supposedly barely surviving. The comments on the sob story video started shifting, the tide turning in real time. Maybe there's more to this story. Wow, just checked her Instagram. This doesn't add up. You can't cry poverty on Facebook while posting $200 brunches on Instagram. Pick a lane. Anyone else notice she conveniently left out why her mill cut her off? That Gucci bag costs more than I make in a month, but okay, January. The shares kept coming, but now they were different. Now they were people exposing the performance, calling out the contradiction, doing the math I'd been doing alone in my kitchen for months. Tanya tried to control the damage, started deleting comments, then deleted the vacation photos, then made her Instagram private. But the internet never forgets. People had screenshots, had receipts, had evidence. By Tuesday morning, the narrative had flipped completely. And I hadn't said a single word. I'd just let the truth speak for itself. Mr. Lewis's office smelled like old books and lemon furniture polish. The kind of place that had probably looked exactly the same for 30 years. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs with brass studs, framed diplomas on the wall that had faded to sepia in the sunlight. Marge had recommended him. He's semi-retired, she'd said. Only takes clients he actually wants to help, but he's sharp as a tack and he doesn't suffer fools. I sat across from him with 3 years of my life spread out on his desk, bank statements printed and organized by month, screenshots of text messages printed and highlighted, a handwritten ledger I'd been keeping since the birthday, every transfer, every emergency, every request with dates and amounts, 123 pages of evidence that I'd been a fool. Mr. Lewis didn't rush. He read through everything with the slow, methodical attention of someone who'd spent 50 years learning that details matter. He made notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally pushed his glasses up his nose. The silence in that office was heavy, broken only by the rustling of paper and the scratch of his pen. Finally, he set down the last page, looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice gravelly with age and what might have been controlled anger. "You've given them over $120,000. That's not counting the joint account, which we'll get to. And they couldn't show up for your 75th birthday?" Hearing the number said out loud, in that quiet office, by a stranger who had no reason to soften it, it hit different than seeing it on my own spreadsheet at 3 a.m. "No," I said. My voice sounded small. "They couldn't." He sat back in his chair. It creaked. "What would you like to do?" And that was it. No judgment, no lecture. Just, what would you like to do? For the first time in 3 years, someone was asking me what I wanted, instead of telling me what I owed. "I want to make sure this never happens again," I said. He nodded slowly. "Then let's build you a fortress." The joint account was first. I'd opened it 5 years ago, right after Arthur died. David had suggested it, gently, carefully, framed his concern for me. "Mom, what if something happens to you? What if you have an emergency and you can't access your accounts? I should be on there just in case, just so I can help if you need it." It had made sense at the time. I was 69, newly widowed, terrified of being alone and helpless. Having David's name on an account felt like a safety net. Except he'd never used it for emergencies, not my emergencies anyway. Mr. Lewis pulled up the account history, showed me the withdrawals I'd been too afraid to look at closely. 200 here, 500 there, 1,000, 1,500. Withdrawals that happened between the weekly transfers, when David needed just a little extra for something that couldn't wait until Friday. "This account has $47,000 in it right now," Mr. Lewis said. "He has full access to it. He could drain it today if he wanted to." My stomach dropped. 47,000. Arthur's life insurance money. The money I'd been saving for? I didn't even know what. A medical emergency. Long-term care if I needed it. Something that made me feel less terrified of being old and alone. "We're closing it," I said. "Today." Mr. Lewis made the calls. We transferred everything to a new account. Just my name. Just my social security number. Just my money. When he slid the paper across the desk for me to sign, my hand hovered over it for a long moment. This felt final in a way nothing else had. This felt like signing divorce papers from my own son. But I signed it. My signature looked shaky on the line, but it was there. "One more thing," Mr. Lewis said. "Your will. When's the last time you updated it?" I swallowed hard. "Not since Arthur died." "And who are the current beneficiaries?" "David, everything goes to David." He didn't say anything, just waited. "I'd like to change that," I said quietly. The appointment took 3 days to arrange. Mr. Lewis's colleague, a woman named Patricia Chen, specialized in estate planning. She sat with me in a conference room with a view of the park and listened while I explained what I wanted. Not what I was taking away, what I was creating. The Arthur and Eleanor Hayes Second Chances Scholarship, for women over 50 returning to school, women who'd put their dreams on hold for husbands, for children, for survival, women who'd spent decades making everyone else's life possible and had finally reached a point where they could ask, "What about me?" Women like I used to be, before Arthur died and I forgot I was allowed to want things. "The fund will be managed by the Community College Foundation," I told Patricia. "Full scholarships, tuition, books, fees, everything. I want to remove every barrier I can." She smiled, actually smiled. "How many scholarships per year?" I did the math in my head. $700 a week, 52 weeks, $36,400 a year. Average community college tuition, about $15,000 for the full program. 2 full scholarships per year, I said. Maybe 3, depending on the costs. Patricia wrote it all down. Asked questions about the criteria, the selection process, the administration. We worked through every detail until my head hurt and my heart felt strangely light. When I signed the new will, my hand didn't shake at all. David's name appeared nowhere in the document. Instead, there was a fund that would outlive me. A legacy that would help women who actually needed it, who would actually appreciate it, who would write thank you letters and mean them. Arthur would have loved this. He'd always said the best investment is in people who are trying. I just finally learned the difference between people who are trying and people who are taking. I walked out of that office with copies of everything in a folder under my arm. The joint account closed, the will changed, my fortress built, and for the first time in 3 years I felt like I could breathe. They showed up on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after I'd stopped the transfers. I was in the kitchen making tea when I saw David's car pull into the driveway. My heart did that traitorous thing it always does when I see my son. That leap of hope, that stupid, stubborn belief that maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time he'll actually see me. Through the window, I watched them get out. David carrying flowers, grocery store roses, still in the plastic sleeve. Tanya with a white bakery box tied with string. They'd coordinated this, planned it, probably rehearsed it in the car on the way over. I should have left the door locked, should have pretended I wasn't home, but my hand was already reaching for the doorknob because some part of me, the mother part, the part that remembers rocking him to sleep and teaching him to tie his shoes, still wanted to believe that my son had come home. "Mom," David said when I opened the door. His smile was uncertain, boyish. The smile he used to give me when he'd broken something and was hoping I wouldn't be too mad. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside, let them enter my home like I'd let them into my bank account, knowing it was probably a mistake doing it anyway. They sat on the couch, the same couch where David had first asked for help 3 years ago. Tanya set the bakery box on the coffee table. I could see through the clear top that it was a small cake, chocolate, my favorite. Of course they remembered that. They remembered everything that was useful. "We brought you something," Tanya said. Her voice was soft, careful. The voice you use around a frightened animal you're trying to coax closer. We wanted to talk, to apologize." David handed me the flowers. I took them because refusing would have felt cruel, and I was raised to believe that cruelty was the worst thing you could be, even when kindness was killing you slowly. "Eleanor," Tanya began, and she was doing most of the talking, which should have been my first clue. David just sat there nodding along, looking at his shoes. "We've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks. About everything, about how we handled things." I waited. "We were so stressed," she continued. "With David's job situation, with the bills, with everything, we weren't ourselves. We said things we didn't mean, did things we didn't mean. We know we hurt you." David finally spoke up. "We were wrong, Mom, about your birthday, about a lot of things." I watched them carefully. Noticed that Tanya's hand was on David's knee like she was coaching him through his lines. Noticed that neither of them had asked how I was doing, how I'd been these past 3 weeks, whether I'd been eating, sleeping, managing on my own. They hadn't mentioned my birthday specifically, just vague references to things and how we handled things. They weren't here because they were sorry. They were here because the money had stopped. But I let them talk. Let Tanya spin her story about stress and misunderstandings and family being more important than pride. Let David chime in occasionally with his careful agreements, his rehearsed remorse. 20 minutes of small talk. 20 minutes of performance. Then David cleared his throat and glanced at Tanya, and I knew we were getting to the real reason for the flowers and the cake. "So, Mom," he said, trying to sound casual and failing, "we were hoping maybe we could talk about working something out, financially." There it was. "What kind of something?" I asked. "A payment plan," Tanya said quickly. "Nothing like before. We're not asking for that. Even just $300 a week? Just to help us get back on our feet. Just temporary. Just until my new job starts," David added. "I have an interview next week. Should hear back within a few days. This would just be a bridge." I would learn later from Sam that there was no interview. There never had been. David hadn't applied to a single job in 6 months. But sitting there in my living room, watching them perform their apology like a scripted play, I already knew. I could see it in the way Tanya's eyes kept flicking to her phone, in the way David couldn't quite meet my gaze, in the way neither of them had brought up the joint account, because they didn't know yet that it was closed and they were probably counting on it as backup if I said no. I stood up, walked to my desk in the corner of the living room, opened the drawer and pulled out a folder. Mr. Lewis had given me a copy of everything. I'd been keeping it there, waiting. Not waiting for this, exactly, but waiting for the right moment to speak a truth I could no longer avoid. "I wanted you both to know something," I said, turning back to face them. "I've changed my will." The room went very still. Tanya's hand froze on David's knee. David's eyes finally snapped up to mine. "I've removed you both as beneficiaries. Everything is going to a scholarship fund. The Arthur and Eleanor Hayes Second Chances Scholarship. For women over 50 returning to school, women who had to put their dreams on hold. It's something Arthur and I always talked about creating. I thought you should hear it from me." I watched Tanya's face change. The mask of concern and apology sliding off like wet paint, revealing something harder underneath, something cold and calculating that I'd been seeing for 3 years but pretending not to notice. "Are you kidding me?" she said, and the soft, careful voice was completely gone now. "Are you actually kidding me right now?" David grabbed her arm. "Tanya!" She jerked away from him, stood up. "After everything we've been through, after everything we've sacrificed?" "What exactly have you sacrificed?" I asked quietly. 3 years. Tanya's voice was rising. 3 years of dealing with your guilt trips and your manipulation and your... "Tanya, stop." David was standing now too, trying to salvage something, anything. "Mom, listen, you're upset, you're angry, we get that, but you're not thinking clearly. You're not... This is a major financial decision, and maybe you should talk to someone before..." "I talked to a lawyer," I said. 3 weeks ago. It's done." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Tanya's face had gone red. David's had gone pale. They stared at me like I'd become a stranger. Like the woman who'd funded their life for 3 years had suddenly transformed into someone they didn't recognize. Good. Maybe now we were finally seeing each other clearly. "Are you kidding me?" Tanya's voice pitched higher, louder, filling my small living room with a rage that had probably been simmering just beneath the surface for weeks. "After everything we..." She caught herself, stopped mid-sentence. But it was too late. We all heard it. "After everything we gave you, after everything we did for you," as if 3 years of taking my money had somehow been a favor they'd been doing for me. David stepped forward, hands raised like he was approaching something dangerous. "Mom, listen. You're not thinking clearly. You're upset. You're emotional right now, and this is a major decision that you can't just..." "I'm thinking clearly for the first time in 3 years," I said. My voice surprised me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't shaking. It was calm, steady. The voice of someone who'd finally stopped lying to herself. David's mouth opened and closed. Tanya was pacing now, her heels clicking sharply against my hardwood floors, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" she demanded. "Do you have any idea how selfish this is?" "Selfish," I repeated. The word hung in the air between us. "You want to know what I've been thinking about, Tanya? Really thinking about?" I didn't wait for her to answer. "I've been thinking about how I skipped my heart medication for 2 months last winter because I couldn't afford both the prescription refill and your emergency car repair. The car repair that cost $1,200. I was rationing pills, cutting them in half, taking them every other day instead of every day like the doctor ordered. I ended up in the emergency room at 3 a.m. with chest pains because my blood pressure had spiked, so high the nurse thought I was having a heart attack." David's face went white. "I've been thinking about how I ate crackers and canned soup for dinner 4 nights a week so you could afford date nights at restaurants that charge $30 for a steak. About how I stopped buying new clothes, stopped getting my hair done, stopped doing anything for myself because every dollar I didn't spend on me was a dollar I could send to you." My voice was still steady, still quiet, but each word landed like a stone. I've been thinking about my 75th birthday, about sitting in a restaurant for 35 minutes waiting for my son to show up, about the waiter, his name was Marcus, he was 19 years old, worked for $9 an hour, and how he was the only person who wished me happy birthday that day. A stranger, a child really. He showed me more kindness in 5 minutes than my own family showed me in 3 years. Mom. David's voice cracked. I've been thinking about the vacation photos, I continued. The ones from Cancun, posted while you were supposedly struggling to pay rent. The designer purse, the designer sunglasses, the cocktails by the pool. I calculated how much that trip cost. It was more than I spend on groceries in 6 months. Tanya had stopped pacing. She stood frozen, her face flushed with anger and something else. Something that looked almost like shame, but not quite deep enough to be real. We deserved a break, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. We were stressed. You needed my money, I said quietly. That's all you've ever needed from me. David's face crumpled. For just a moment, I saw him as he used to be. 6 years old with scraped knees, crying in my arms. 10 years old, afraid of the dark, climbing into bed between Arthur and me. 16. Heartbroken over his first girlfriend, sitting at this same kitchen table while I made him hot chocolate and told him it would be okay. Mom, please, he whispered. Please don't do this. For a moment, one terrible wavering moment, I almost gave in. Almost said it was okay, we could work it out. I'd made a mistake. Let's forget this ever happened. Then Tanya grabbed his arm. Hard. Possessive. Come on, David, she said, her voice ice cold now. All pretense gone. She's made her choice. She's chosen money over family. Let's go. She was pulling him toward the door. David was looking back at me, his eyes red, his face a mixture of hurt and anger and something I couldn't quite name. And I realized, this was it. This was the moment. The choice I'd been avoiding for 3 years was finally here, unavoidable, staring me in the face. No, honey, I said, and my voice was so gentle it surprised even me. You did that 3 years ago. You chose money over family the moment you started seeing me as a bank account instead of a mother. I'm just done funding it. Tanya froze. David stopped in the doorway. That's not, David started, but his voice trailed off. Because he knew, somewhere deep down underneath all the justifications and excuses and carefully constructed narratives, he knew I was right. They left. Tanya first, storming out without another word. David lingering for just a moment in the doorway, opening his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closing it and following his wife to the car. I watched through the window as they drove away, watched until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door, locked it, and stood in my empty living room with my back against the wood. That's when I cried. Not the silent, dignified tears I'd been holding back for weeks. Real crying. The kind that shakes your whole body, that comes from somewhere deep and wounded and finally ready to heal. But they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of relief. Relief that I'd finally told the truth. Relief that I'd finally chosen myself. Relief that the weight I'd been carrying for 3 years, the weight of pretending, of hoping, of funding a love that had never really existed, was finally, blessedly gone. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat at my kitchen table with Arthur's old mug in my hands, and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. The phone call from Sam came 2 days after the confrontation. Eleanor, he said, and his voice was thick with embarrassment. I owe you an apology. A real one. David called me a few weeks ago, fed me this whole story about you having memory problems, making irrational decisions. I should have called you directly. Should have known better than to take his word without hearing yours. I'm sorry. It's okay, Sam. It's not okay. But thank you for saying that. He paused. For what it's worth, half the family's talking about what happened, and most of them are on your side. I hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected the story to spread beyond the 4 walls of my living room. But apparently Tanya's Facebook theatrics had made sure everyone knew there was drama. They just hadn't known the full story until now. David's Aunt Marie sent a card. Not a text, an actual card with a handwritten note inside, proud of you for standing up for yourself. Arthur would be too. You deserved better than what they gave you. Love, Marie. I cried reading that. Put it on my refrigerator next to the grocery list and the doctor's appointment reminder. But the real consequences were happening in places I couldn't see. Marge told me about it over coffee the following week. Tanya's employer, a nonprofit organization that helped low-income families with housing assistance, had seen the Facebook video, had seen the comments, had seen the screenshots of Tanya's Instagram showing designer bags and luxury vacations. Someone reported it to HR, Marge said, stirring sugar into her coffee. Asked how someone working for a nonprofit helping poor families could afford that lifestyle on her salary. They started asking questions. I didn't ask what kind of questions. Didn't need to. I could imagine. Questions about expense reports, about hours worked, about whether the lifestyle matched the income. Tanya's social media went dark completely. Instagram deleted. Facebook profile gone. The digital performance shut down overnight. I felt a small, petty satisfaction about that. The kind I wasn't proud of but couldn't quite shake. 3 weeks later, David called. Not a text. An actual phone call. At 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I almost didn't answer. Stared at his name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. But something in me, that stubborn, foolish mother part, made me answer. Mom. His voice was wrecked. Broken. Mom, I'm so sorry. He was crying. Actually crying. Not the manipulative tears of someone trying to get what they wanted, but the raw, ugly crying of someone whose world had just collapsed. The apartment, we got evicted, 30-day notice, we couldn't make rent without your help. The car got repossessed yesterday. I've been applying to jobs, real jobs, anything I can find. I got hired at a warehouse, night shift, $10 an hour. Didn't interrupt. Let him talk. Tanya moved back in with her parents. She said she couldn't do this anymore, couldn't live like this. She left 3 days ago. His voice cracked. Mom, I didn't see it. I didn't see what I was doing, what we were doing. I didn't see how much you sacrificed until it was gone. Until everything was gone. Where are you staying? I asked quietly. Sam's couch. He's letting me crash there until I can afford a room somewhere. I'm working 2 jobs now. The warehouse at night, and I got a day job at a call center. I'm trying, Mom. I'm really trying. The silence stretched between us. I could hear him breathing, waiting, hoping I'd say something that would fix this. But I'd learned the hard way that some things can't be fixed with words. I want to see you, I said finally. Just you. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? Yes. Yes, of course. Anywhere. Anytime. We met at a small cafe near Sam's apartment. I got there first, ordered tea, and waited. When David walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight. Not in a healthy way, in the way people lose weight when they're not eating enough, sleeping enough, when stress is eating them from the inside out. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes had dark circles under them. He looked exhausted. Broken. He looked like someone who'd finally hit bottom. He sat down across from me, hands wrapped around a coffee cup he couldn't afford, but I'd insisted on buying for him. I don't want money, he said before I could speak. I'm not here to ask for money. I just want to know if there's any way if I can still be your son. My throat tightened. You've always been my son, David. That was never the question. What was the question? Whether you saw me as your mother or your ATM. I took a breath. Whether you loved me or just needed me. He flinched, looked down at his coffee. I love you. I know I didn't show it. I know I took advantage. I know I let Tanya. He stopped. No. That's not fair. I can't blame her. I made my own choices. I saw what was happening and I let it happen because it was easier than being uncomfortable. Why are you here, David? Because I want to fix this. I don't know how, but I want to try. He looked up at me and his eyes were red. Can I call you sometimes? Just to talk? Not about money, just to talk, to check in, to ask how you're doing. I studied him. This broken, humbled version of my son. The one who'd finally learned what it felt like to struggle without a safety net. On one condition, I said. Anything. You call on my birthday, every year, and you show up. His face crumpled. I will. I promise. I swear to God, Mom, I will. I reached across the table, took his hand. It was rough now, calloused from warehouse work. Then yes, I said quietly. You can call me. He squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. And for the first time in 3 years, when my son looked at me, I saw something real. Not need, not performance. Just love, complicated and imperfect, and finally honest. Friday mornings mean something different now. I still wake up early. Still make my coffee in Arthur's old mug. Still sit at the kitchen table with my laptop open at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the transfer is scheduled. But now, when 9 o'clock comes and $700 leaves my account, it doesn't disappear into a void of ungratefulness. It goes to the Arthur and Eleanor Hayes Second Chances Scholarship Fund, and 3 times a year, that money transforms into something I never expected. Hope. The first letter came from Linda, 53 years old, divorced after 28 years of marriage, returning to nursing school because she'd always wanted to help people but had put it off to raise her kids and support her husband's career. Her handwriting was careful, deliberate, like she'd drafted it multiple times before sending the final version. Dear Mrs. Hayes, it began, I don't have adequate words to express what this scholarship means to me. For the first time in 3 decades, I'm doing something just for myself, just for my future. Thank you for seeing women like me. Thank you for believing we're worth investing in. I cried reading that letter. Put it in a folder I keep in my desk drawer. Read it again whenever I need reminding that money spent on people who value it is never wasted. Patricia wrote next. 61 years old, finally pursuing the teaching degree she'd abandoned at 22 when she got married and her husband said they couldn't afford for her to finish school. Now widowed, working part-time at a library, taking night classes and weekend courses to complete the dream she'd put on hold for nearly 40 years. You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever, she wrote. The belief that it's not too late, that I still matter, that my dreams still count. Then Grace. 58. Studying accounting after her husband's death left her completely unprepared to manage finances, to understand the investments he'd made, to navigate a world he'd always handled for her. She wanted to make sure no other woman ended up as lost as she'd been. I'm learning to take care of myself, her letter said. And then I'm going to teach other women to do the same. Your gift is going to ripple further than you know. Every Friday at 9 a.m., I make that transfer, and I don't regret a single dollar. My life looks different now, too. I refill my prescriptions on time. Take my blood pressure medication every single day, exactly as prescribed. My doctor noticed at my last checkup, my numbers are better than they've been in 3 years. Whatever you're doing, she said, keep doing it. I'm taking care of myself, I told her, finally. I joined a watercolor class at the senior center on Tuesday afternoons. I'm terrible at it. My trees look like green blobs and my skies are always too dark, but I don't care. I laugh at my mistakes. I try again. I'm learning that doing something badly is better than doing nothing at all. Marge and Grace and I have dinner together every Thursday. Real dinners, with appetizers and dessert and wine if we feel like it. We talk about books and grandchildren and politics and the ridiculous things happening at church. We talk about everything except money, because none of us need anything from each other except company. And I put Arthur's photo back on my nightstand. For 3 years it had been in a drawer. I couldn't look at it. Couldn't face the man who'd worked 40 years at the post office, who'd saved every penny, who'd built a life of dignity and purpose, because I felt like I'd failed him. Like I'd taken everything he'd worked for and thrown it away on a son who didn't appreciate it. But now, when I look at that photo, Arthur in his postal uniform, grinning at the camera with that slightly crooked smile, I don't feel shame. I feel proud. Because this scholarship fund? This is exactly what Arthur would have wanted. He always said the best investment is in people who are trying, people who want to build something better, not people who want someone else to build it for them. Last Friday, David showed up for dinner. Just him. He brought grocery store flowers, Daisy's my favorite, and after we ate the spaghetti I'd made, he went outside and fixed the loose railing on my porch, the one he'd been promising to fix for 2 years. We didn't talk about money, didn't talk about the past. We talked about his new apartment, a small studio, but it's his, paid for with money he earned. We talked about the promotion he might get at the call center. We talked about a book he was reading, a show he was watching, normal things that normal families talk about. As he was leaving, he stopped at the door, turned around, hugged me. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said quietly. I know it's 2 months late, but I hugged him back. "I'm here?" Held on for just a moment longer than necessary. "I know," I whispered. "It's not the relationship we used to have. It's not the son I thought I'd raised, but it's honest. It's real. And it's built on something stronger than weekly transfers and emergency requests. It's built on respect. I've learned something in these past months. Something I wish I'd understood 3 years ago. Love without respect is just convenience. It's using someone's heart as a credit card, spending their devotion without ever intending to pay it back. But respect without entitlement? That's family. That's the foundation Arthur and I built our marriage on. That's what I should have demanded from my son from the very beginning. The money I once spent trying to buy my son's presents now buys women their futures. Women who write thank you letters without being asked. Women who understand that a gift is not an obligation, that generosity is not weakness, that helping someone doesn't mean letting them consume you. Arthur would have loved this. He would have loved knowing that his 40 years of steady work, of showing up every day, of building something solid and good, that it didn't end with us. That it's rippling forward, changing lives, giving women a second chance at dreams they thought they'd lost. Last I heard, she's engaged to someone new, a guy who works in finance, makes good money, posts pictures of their expensive dinners on social media. She's back to her old routine, luxury brunches, designer bags, carefully curated photos that make everything look perfect, already posting about family values and what really matters in life. But that's her story to ruin. This one's mine, and I chose a different ending. If someone in your life only shows up when your wallet does, if love feels like a transaction that only goes one way, if you're sacrificing your health and your happiness to fund someone else's comfort, maybe it's time to close that account. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, out of respect for yourself. Subscribe if you've ever had to choose between being used and being alone. If you've ever wondered if stopping the money meant stopping the love. If you've learned the hard way that the people who truly care about you won't make you pay for the privilege. Next week, I'm telling you about the mother-in-law who planned the perfect revenge at her own funeral. You won't believe what she left in that will. Trust me,